Hello and welcome to this spotlight video on the South Carolina. A quick look at lesser known and unusual locomotives from the early days of steam. During the 19th and 20th centuries, locomotive designers were looking for ways to build large and powerful locomotives, which had a low axle load so they didn't damage the track and could also tackle sharp curves. The first locomotive with a flexible wheelbase, i.e. one fitted with a bogie, was that by William and Edward Chapman, which they patented in 1812. Matthew Murray of Leeds essayed his own articulated machine in 1825. The boiler was on one set of powered wheels and the engine on another, a design which presaged the freaks built for Brunel's Great Western Railway 10 years later. The first successful articulated locomotives were those designed by the French engineer Jean-Jacques Meyer, and which he patented in 1861. In England, Robert Francis Fairley followed with a similar design which he too patented in 1864. Nor should we forget the work of the Swiss engineer Anatole Mallet or Herbert William Garrett. But the granddaddy of them all was probably the South Carolina by Horatio Allen. We've met him before in videos about the Aganoria and the Lancashire Witch. South Carolina was built and quite aptly named after the South Carolina Canal and Railroad Company in the United States. She was built during 1831 by the West Point Foundry Company in New York, and entered service in the February of 1832. Viewed from the side, she looks an awful lot like an early form of Fairley. Ostensibly, there are two boilers back to back, with a common firebox surmounted by a large steam dome. There are two power bogies under each of the boiler barrels, and these power bogies are free to articulate around fixed pivot points. But if you look a bit closer, things get a bit, well, odd. The driver is apparently standing on top of the firebox, and then there doesn't appear to be any way of stoking the fire or anywhere to leave the coal. And things get even more peculiar when we look at her in plan view. Instead of expecting two boiler barrels, there are four of them. The steam dome is not central on the firebox but offset to one side, presumably to create room for the driver. Looking at the power bogies, instead of an expected twin cylinder arrangement with the cylinders connected to the power bogie, in order to avoid complicated flexible steam pipes, each bogie had a single cylinder, which was rigidly fixed under the smoke box at either end. South Carolina was 22 feet long overall and weighed 10 tons. Her driving wheels were 5 feet in diameter, and the leading wheels were 3 feet. Horatio Allen built a batch of these locomotives between 1832 and 1833, but they proved to be colossal failures. They spent more time in the repair shops than out on the line earning revenue, and all of them were retired by 1838. The failure of the design was blamed on poor workmanship and poor materials, but as John White Jr. notes, if Allen's double-enders were not let down by their design but by their materials and workmanship, then presumably other double-ended locomotives would have been ordered to the same design but from more reliable builders, and they weren't. So those are the basics on the South Carolina. Probably the first practical attempt at building an articulated locomotive, which men such as Robert Francis Fairley and Herbert William Garrett would later be inspired by. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe.